I'm recording this on my phone, propped against a jar of marmalade. My name is Arthur Finch. I'm 81 years old. My biggest regret is that I didn't start living for myself decades ago. I'm not talking about affairs or reckless spending. I'm talking about the quiet treason of a life lived on someone else's terms. Every choice was a whisper, every dream deferred, until you wake up and the person in the mirror is a polite stranger. Let me tell you what happened. It started with my father. He was a stern schoolmaster. He valued order above all. My mother valued peace. My job was to provide both. I got top marks. I wore the clothes they chose. I studied accounting because it was solid. I met Eleanor at a church social. She was bright. She was kind. Our parents got along. It wasn't a lightning strike. It was a sensible merger. When I proposed, it felt like the next correct line in the script. My heart was quiet. I mistook that for contentment. The script had a sequel, a house, a promotion, children. We had 2 daughters, Claire and Lydia. I loved them fiercely. But my love was functional. I was the provider. I rose at 6. I caught the 7:15 train. I crunched numbers for a firm I felt nothing for. I returned a husk. Weekends were for chores, for obligatory visits. Eleanor ran the household with a kind, efficient grace. We were a perfect silent machine. I had a dream once, to sail a boat, to paint. I folded that dream up, smaller and smaller. I put it in the back of a desk drawer I never opened. I told myself it was for the best. That drawer stayed shut for 30 years. Then, a tremor. I was 64. My colleague, Malcolm, slumped at his desk. A heart attack. Gone. At his funeral, his son talked about him. A passionate gardener. A terrible joke teller. A man who built doll houses. I didn't recognize that man. He was a stranger. A cold dread washed over me. At my funeral, what would they say? He balanced the books. He never made a fuss. That night I stared at my sleeping wife. I felt like an imposter in my own life. The fraud of me was suddenly unbearably loud. I decided to speak, to test the walls. It was a disaster. Over meatloaf, I cleared my throat. I said, I think when I retire, I might take an art class. Eleanor blinked. She said, Art? Arthur, you don't draw. The girls chuckled. Claire said, Dad, you'll be busy. Mom needs help with the garden. Their reactions weren't cruel. They were baffled. My identity was so fixed. My desire was an absurd glitch. I backed down instantly. I said, yes, of course. Just a thought. The moment shriveled. I felt foolish. The cage door was open, but I'd forgotten how to walk through it. My rebellion lasted 11 seconds, so I retired. I did all the expected things. I gardened, I babysat. A hollow ache widened inside me. Then, at 78, the chest pains, tests, scans, a somber doctor. He said, it's your heart, Mr. Finch. Your energy will be limited. Be mindful. Mortality was a ticking clock in my rib cage. Eleanor became my vigilant keeper. Don't overdo it, Arthur. Sit, Arthur. Her love was a smothering blanket. I looked at the years ahead, diminishing, careful, and a reckless anger boiled up. It was volcanic. It demanded an outlet. That anger found a lie. I told Eleanor I was joining a seniors walking group. Instead, I took the bus to the community college. I stood outside the art studio. I smelled turpentine and clay. My hands shook. I walked in. I signed up for a sculpture class. I used money from a secret coffee fund. The first day, I held a lump of clay. It was cold. It was messy. It was terrifying. For 90 minutes, I didn't think about my heart. I didn't think about my age. I just tried to make a shape. My fingers remembered a longing my mind had forgotten. That shape changed everything. For 2 years, I lived 2 lives. Dutiful Arthur at home. And in that studio, I was someone else. I got paint on my clothes. I argued about light with a fiery woman named Iris. My hands learned to carve wood. I made a twisted, ugly piece called regret. I made a small, soaring bird called maybe. I hid them in a locker. The lies piled up. Fake bus delays. Fictional walking routes. The guilt crushed me. But the freedom was oxygen. I was a junkie for it. Then my daughter Claire saw me. She was supposed to be across town, but there she was, outside the college cafe. She stared as I walked out with Iris. I was laughing. I had clay under my nails. Her face was pure confusion, then hurt. She said, "Dad, what are you doing here? Who is this?" The lie died in my throat. I introduced Iris. Claire's eyes went from my messy clothes to my face. She said, "You said you were at the park." I had no defense. I mumbled, "I'll explain at home." The car ride was silent. I could hear the roar of the coming avalanche. The confrontation at home was worse. Eleanor was devastated, not by the art, by the deception. She wept. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you think I'd forbid it?" My daughters were angry. "You lied for years with your heart." They saw selfishness. They saw risk. I tried to explain the quiet despair, the feeling of being erased. They couldn't hear it. They saw a frail old man being reckless. The worst part, seeing myself through their eyes. I looked like a fool. I packed a bag. I said I'd stay at a hotel. As I left, I wondered if I'd just burned my life down for a handful of clay. The taste was ashes. Alone in a cheap room, I faced the silence. And in that silence, I found a terrible choice. For a week, I was adrift. I missed them terribly. But I also missed the studio with a physical ache. I realized the truth. I couldn't go back to being only what they needed. Not even for peace. I invited Eleanor to the college. I showed her my locker, the twisted regret, the soaring maybe. I didn't speak. She touched the rough wood of the bird. Her fingers traced its form. She cried again, but differently. She whispered, "All this was in you, and I never knew." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was the first painful glimpse of the man she'd married, buried for 50 years. That was 3 years ago. I still live with Eleanor. It's louder now. We fight sometimes about my time, my energy, but we also talk, really talk. The girls came around, slowly. My grandson hangs a wobbly clay dinosaur I made next to his bed. My heart is still ticking, more carefully than ever. But now, when I look at the clock, I see time I'm using, not just serving. So here is my confession, my message in a bottle for you. Don't wait for a diagnosis. Don't wait for a funeral. The cost of waiting is the life you're meant to live. Start now. Be messy. Be afraid. But be, please. But you know what? That glimpse was enough. It was a crack of light under a door. We drove home. We didn't talk. But it wasn't the same heavy silence. It was a thinking silence. A few days later, Eleanor came into the shed while I was potting a plant. She stood there for a minute. Then she said, "Your class, is it on Wednesdays?" I nodded. My hands were dirty. "The early bus?" she asked. I nodded again. She sighed, a big, tired sigh. "Take your phone and your pills, and for God's sake, don't lift anything heavy." That was it. She walked out. It wasn't a blessing. It was a truce, a shaky one. I went back to the studio that Wednesday. It felt different. The secret was out. The thrill was gone. But something better was there. It was just me and the clay. No looking over my shoulder. Iris asked where I'd been. I said, "Family trouble." She just nodded. She didn't pry. We worked. My hands felt clumsy again. I was angry. I wanted that feeling back, the escape. But it was work now. Real work. And that was okay. Then Claire came over. Alone. She brought my grandson, Leo. He was 4. He ran into the living room. He didn't see me at first. I was just Grandpa. He climbed onto my lap. He smelled like crackers and sunshine. He said, "We made dinosaurs at preschool." He showed me a lump of painted clay. It was wonderful. A purple blob with googly eyes. I held it. My throat got tight. Claire was watching me. She said, "He wants to show you something." Leo wiggled down and pulled a book from her bag. It was a library book about sculpture. Big pictures of Michelangelo, of abstract metal things. He opened it on the floor. He pointed. "Can you make this?" he asked. I looked at Claire. Her face was careful, neutral. This was her test, her peace offering. I got down on the floor with Leo. My knees cracked. I said, "I don't know, but we could try to make your dinosaur better. Give him some spikes." Leo's eyes got huge. "Now?" So we did. We went to the kitchen table. Eleanor brought us some old newspaper. She didn't say anything. She just spread it out. Claire made coffee. I showed Leo how to roll a snake of clay to make a spine. His little fingers were so sure. He wasn't afraid of the mess. We got clay everywhere. On the table. On our clothes. Eleanor took a photo with her phone. I saw her smile, a real one. It was small, but it was there. That dinosaur changed things. Leo called it Grandpa's monster. He took it home. Claire said he wouldn't sleep without it. The next week, she asked if I could watch him on my class day. A real question, not an assumption. I said yes, but I asked if I could bring him with me, just for the last part, to see the studio. She thought about it. She said, okay. So that's what I did. I went to class. I worked on a new piece, a simple bowl. Then, near the end, Claire dropped Leo off. I took his hand. We walked into the big, bright room. The smells, the mess, the students covered in paint. He squeezed my hand. He whispered, "Wow." I showed him my locker. I showed him Maybe, the bird. He touched its wing. He said, "It wants to fly." Iris came over. She had green paint in her hair. She shook Leo's hand very seriously. He laughed. On the bus home, he chattered the whole way. About the spinning wheels, the big kiln, the lady with the green hair. He wasn't seeing an old man's secret. He was seeing magic. And through his eyes, so was I. But life isn't a straight line. Lydia was harder. She's a practical one, like I was. She came over for dinner. She said, "I'm glad you have a hobby, Dad, but the lion, I just don't get it." I tried again to explain, the feeling of being empty. She listened. Then she said, "But we needed you all those years. We needed you to be steady." And that hurt, because she was right. I was steady. I was a rock, but a rock doesn't feel the sun. I told her that. My voice shook. I said, "I can still be here for you, but I need to be me too, even if it's messy." She didn't say much. She just hugged me goodbye a little longer than usual. The real fight came later, with Eleanor. It was about a wood carving class. It was on a Saturday, a whole day. She had made plans for us, to visit friends. I said I wanted to go to the class. She got upset. "You see," she said, "it's taking over. You're choosing this over everything." I said, "I'm choosing it over one thing, one Saturday." We argued, real voices, not quiet resentment. It was awful, and it was honest. In the end, I went to the class. She went to see her friends alone. I felt guilty the whole time, but I went. And when I came home, she asked to see what I made. I showed her a block of wood with just the beginnings of a shape. She nodded. She said, "It's a start." That's all. But it was enough. We were learning a new language. It was full of pauses and misunderstandings, but we were trying. That's all. But it was enough. We were learning a new language. It was full of pauses and misunderstandings, but we were trying. You see, I thought that was the hard part. I thought once they saw, once they knew, the war was over. I was wrong. The real war was inside me, and I was losing. My heart started arguing back, not just ticking but protesting. Shortness of breath just climbing the stairs. A dizzy spell in the studio. Iris had to get me a chair. The doctor adjusted my pills. His voice was gentle but firm. "Arthur, you have to pace yourself. This isn't a suggestion. I looked at my hands. They were just starting to learn, and my body was quitting. The hardest moment was with Leo. He was 5. He wanted to build a castle out of clay, a big one. We planned it for weeks, drawings all over my kitchen table. We had a Saturday set aside, just us. The night before, I couldn't sleep. My chest felt tight, a dull, familiar ache. I took a pill. I stared at the ceiling. I knew. I just knew. In the morning, I felt hollow, weak. Eleanor saw it on my face. She said, "Don't." Just one word. I called Claire. My voice cracked. I said, "Sweetheart, I can't today. I'm not well." I heard the disappointment, not in her voice, in the silence before she answered. "It's okay, Dad. We'll do it another time." Leo got on the phone. He said, "Grandpa, are you sick?" I said, "Yes, buddy, just a little." He said, "Okay, get better." He hung up. I sat at the table surrounded by his drawings. I cried. I cried like I hadn't since I was a boy. This was the cost. I finally found the thing that made me feel alive, and my body was too old to do it. Eleanor found me there. She didn't say anything. She put a hand on my shoulder. Then she started clearing the drawings. She stacked them neatly. It felt like she was packing away a dream. Again. I said, "What's the point?" I didn't mean to say it out loud. She stopped. She looked at me. Really looked. She said, "The point is you tried. The point is he knows you as the grandpa who makes things, not just the grandpa who sits." It was the kindest thing she'd ever said to me, and it broke me, because it was true, and it wasn't enough. I wanted years. I wanted to get good. I wanted to see his face when I finished that castle. I had months, if I was lucky. I went back to the studio one last time to clean out my locker. I took regret and maybe. Iris was there. I told her I was done. She didn't argue. She just said, "You found it late, but you found it. Most people never do." She hugged me. It was awkward. Clay dust and old bones. I got on the bus home, the sculptures in a bag on my lap. The bird felt heavy. I looked out the window. I saw my reflection, an old man with a bag of junk. And you know what? I was angry. Not the hot volcanic anger from before, a cold, quiet anger. At time, at my own cowardice for waiting so long. I'd traded a life for a few stolen afternoons. It was a terrible bargain. I put the sculptures on my dresser. Eleanor didn't comment. Days blurred, doctor visits, naps. I watched the clock. I watched the light move across the room. I felt the canyon inside me again, wider than ever. Then, one afternoon, Leo came over. Claire had an appointment. He went straight to my room. He saw the bird. He said, "It's out." I said, "Yes." He picked it up. He carried it to the living room. He put it on the windowsill. He said, "It needs the sun." He sat next to me on the sofa. He didn't ask about the castle. He just leaned his head against my arm. We sat there, watching the bird, watching the light. And for the first time, I didn't feel the ticking clock. I just felt his small, warm weight. I was here. He was here. It was quiet. It wasn't enough, but it was something. It was real. It was real. And that quiet afternoon with my grandson taught me the final lesson. I was wrong about what it meant to live for myself. I thought it meant a clean break, a solo voyage, a grand, defiant act. It isn't. Living for yourself isn't about leaving. It's about arriving. Finally bringing who you are into the room with the people you love. Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy. My mistake wasn't marrying Eleanor or having a family. My mistake was leaving myself out of it. I showed up as a function, a provider, a steady hand, and I hid the rest. The man who wondered about color, who felt awe at a shape emerging from wood, I locked him away. I thought that man had no place in a practical life. I was a coward. I was afraid that if they saw the real, messy, dreaming me, they wouldn't need the functional me anymore. And I was so afraid of being unneeded that I made myself unseen. Here's what love really requires. It doesn't just require your presence. It requires your essence, your partner, your children. They don't need a statue of a man. They need a person with cracks, with odd hobbies and bad days and passions that don't make immediate sense. When I finally showed Eleanor my sculptures, she wasn't hurt by the art. She was devastated that I hadn't trusted her with the dream. I had robbed her of the chance to know me. I had robbed my daughters of a father who was fully alive. For 50 years, I gave them a perfect, silent machine, and I called it love. It wasn't love. It was a performance. And the deepest regret isn't that I didn't sail a boat. It's that I didn't let my family sail with me, even in the small, daily ways. So my advice, especially if you're my age, is this. Don't perform. Just be there. And by be there, I mean all of you. The you that you were before the world told you who to be. It doesn't require a secret life. It starts with a sentence. I've always wanted to try. This song makes me feel. I don't actually like gardening. Say it. Your family might be baffled. They might laugh. They've known the performance for so long. The real voice will sound strange. Let it. Be strange. Be inconsistent. The goal isn't to get their permission. The goal is to stop asking for it. You don't need a new life. You need to inhabit the one you have. Fully. Authentically. Right now. And if you're thinking, it's too late for me, stop. Just stop. Look at my math. I had 64 years of silence. 2 years of secret, terrified joy. And now these last 3, louder, messier, truer years. Which part of my life weighs more? The 2 years of secret joy changed everything. The 3 years of truth are worth more than the 6 decades of quiet. If this story, this confession of an old man and his clay bird meant anything to you, do something for me. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notifications.